Steve Pechenik, and this is Steve Talks. Hello, I'm Dr. Pechenik, and I want to talk a little bit about Iran. I have been a serious critic of Obama and John Kerry, but one of the things that they have done that I thought was outstanding was the peace treaty with Iran. And the reason for that is very simple. For decades, and I've been involved with Iran for over 50 years, I've always wanted Iran to have a major position in the Middle East, as it has centuries ago when it was considered Persia. Iran is an old culture, one of the oldest cultures that we know. It's Persian, it's Zoroastrian, and it protects Jews, Christians, and Baha'is. I'm against war with Iran, and I'm particularly against the fact that Israel is trying to provoke a war to make sure that America is its ally against Iran. There is really no enemy in Iran. Let me speak a little bit about what I know about Iran and why Iran has always been the fall boy for our CIA. When Mossadegh was the prime minister of Iran in the 1950s, our CIA ordered Roosevelt and Schwarzkopf, the father of the Schwarzkopf, General Schwarzkopf, to come in and overthrow Mossadegh at the insistence of Prime Minister Churchill. Churchill maintained that Mossadegh, who nationalized all the oil wells and the oil companies in Iran, threw out the British petroleum oil, Aramco, American oil, because they wanted to have their own oil company. Instead, we overthrew Mossadegh and we put in a very ineffectual, bombastic man by the name of the Shah of Iran. The Shah of Iran was nothing more than a figurehead for the CIA and really was the son of a stable boy who was placed in the 1930s by British intelligence. So Iran has always been in play among the following nations: Britain, Russia, and the United States, primarily for its oil and primarily for its geopolitical concerns. I got involved with Iran in the 1970s when the Iranians took over the hostages and I had to negotiate with Ayatollah Khomeini. I had a lot of respect for Ayatollah Khomeini. I knew who he was. I understood that he was concerned about the safety of our hostages, but at the same time, he wanted to make his presence known that the Islamic fundamentalists had taken over a corrupt regime. I then was ordered by Jimmy Carter to fly to Iran and meet with Khomeini personally. I resigned, I refused, I said that was an incompetent order, and I suggested that the Iran hostage siege would continue for weeks, if not months. I did not know it would continue for years. The truth of the matter was that our CIA station chief and eventually our ambassador Helms had created a problem in Iran and a problem in the United States. We had 400 foreign service officers, American CIA and other operatives in Iran, of whom only 8 spoke Farsi. So from the very beginning, in the 1950s to the 1970s, we were really maladroit at being able to hand a Persian country which was not Arabic, and that's important to understand. Persia is a country which is not Arab and does not like the Arabs, and it has a history of fighting Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries alongside the United States and alongside Israel, alongside many other allies. What subsequently happened was that Israel began to get involved in Iran for the simple reason that in Iran there were over 100,000 Persian Jews. Now, they've been there for centuries. I witnessed them, I saw them, I was there with them in Isfahan, and I was very impressed how the Iranians take care of the Jews, of the Armenians, of the Catholics, and the Christians. No one was persecuted. In turn, the Israelis felt that they had to have strategic tension in the Middle East. And what they did at that time was to create the Iran-Iraq War. Alongside the neocons, and particularly Zalmay Khalilzad under Secretary of State George Shultz, we created the Iran-Iraq War. and working with Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, who was then criticizing Israel and condemning Israel as a Zionist state, the Israelis nevertheless went in alongside Khomeini, sold him $500 million worth of armaments, tanks, heavy equipment in return for $500 million worth of oils. So the rhetoric was severe. The Israelis had no problem making money from that situation and creating increased strategic tension with Iraq. And of course, who supported Iraq? We, the United States. So as the Israelis flew the Phantom planes in the air on behalf of the Iranians, we flew the Iraqi planes, and in effect, it was just a kabuki with no consequence. On the ground, however, there was a serious consequence. Because of the work of the neocon and Zalmay al-Assad and other warmongers who'd never been at war, there were over 1 million people who were killed. When I went to Iran years ago, I was very saddened to see how the killing field really existed as a result of American intervention, Israeli manipulation, and Iranian gusto. Now, what happened subsequently to that? The Israelis came back and started to supply Iran with oil, agricultural supplies, and started to build up Iran even in 2005, 2006. All along, they would create this notion that Iran, along with Hamas, who Israeli created in 1988 when I was on the West Bank, that's correct, Hamas was created by Israel as a counterforce to Hezbollah, which was Shiite and represented Iran's interest in the Middle East. The Israelis created Hamas in order to create a strategic tension and a constant state of tension where the Israelis could be in battle form and have armaments to use, to ship, and to deliver overseas. So Israel was not this disingenuous little actor who, was looking for peace all over the world. All the time, Israel was playing behind our back, and at the same time using our relationship with Iran as a focal point to make sure that we were always invested in the Middle East, when in fact we had very little national security interest in the Middle East other than oil. But the oil came primarily from Saudi Arabia, it came from Dubai, Qatar, other areas. Rex Tillerson knows this far better than I do. And in order to stop all of this, the Israelis went on and started to provide the Egyptians or the Chinese with missile systems. And the missile systems were then sold to Syria and then sold to Iran. So Israel claimed that the Iranians had missile systems, which of course I knew from having uncovered their track and trail as Australian operatives. These were Mossad operatives who went into China. I said, these are missile systems that you sold to Iran, and then you had counterforces to it. In effect, what Israel has done has become a very poor partner for the United States. It's one of the few countries that actually has killed Americans. In the 1960s, it was Israel that attacked the Liberty ship, knowing fully well it was an intelligence ship right off the borders of Egypt during the Sinai War, and it killed over 37 of our brave military officers and wounded over 131. They knew very well that this was an intelligence ship. They were not marked. They came in as a false flag, and they claimed that they had made a mistake. Well, that mistake was repeated once again on 9/11, when we had Mossad operatives who went into the Twin Towers, blew up both the Twin Towers, and 3 towers came down. So Israel was in a constant state of war, in a constant state of exacerbation of Middle East problems, so that the United States would stand by Israel in order to salvage it. Israel has always maintained that it could attack Iran, its nuclear positions, without any problem. That's a complete lie. Israel is totally incapable of attacking the underground nuclear power plants in Iran. It can do no damage, and it's not able to refuel. So what happened in return? In return, we had President Trump, who promised us that there would be peace and no more wars. Well, that went by the wayside. Instead, he sent an Orthodox Jew, Jared Kushner, to Israel to deal with other Jews who had had no experience in the Middle East, to negotiate somewhat of a peace treaty with the Palestinians, and in the same time try to find peace with Iran. I'm saying to Trump now, Listen to the advice of General Mattis. Listen to the advice of General Dunforth. Listen to Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. They do not want to decertify Iran. I will say the same thing. Do not decertify Iran. If you do, you will pay a very heavy price from the American people. But let me quote to you a famous quote from a man called Donald Trump, who said that the Persians and the Americans are the finest negotiators in the world. Please remember that, President Trump. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. America. Hi, this is Dr. Steve Pachenik, and this is Steve Talks.